So as I was mentioning, everyone, we have these roster verifications that we have to turn in for the financial aid purposes, like I mentioned last time. So please make sure that you all complete the introductory discussion and the syllabus acknowledgement. Plus, they're two really easy grades, so it's a good way to kind of get you all off on the right foot. For those of you all who saw, I graded some of them already. So if you're still missing it, please get it done by today. So today will be the last day that I'll take it because I have to submit the roster verifications tomorrow by noon. So I do need a little bit of time to see who has attended and who hasn't, so that I can submit that information. And remember, like I mentioned last time, that the way that attendance is measured in an online class is through the completion of an assignment. So that's why I have those assignments set up for you all. I mean, they do have their purposes anyway, but they also have, the primary purpose, of course, is to, for y'all to introduce yourselves and for y'all to actually read the syllabus and to understand it. But then the secondary purpose is to also take attendance for the, for the financial aid purposes. So if you haven't done it yet, make sure that you do it. It's very simple. It's not all that difficult. So if you haven't had a chance to do so, please do so. Does anyone need any help in terms of finding the discussions? Are you all able to find them, or is anyone having difficulty with finding them? Is anyone also having difficulty just in general with anything in the class so far in terms of finding anything, not just the discussions, but anything else?
No.
No? Okay. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so then so then, okay, so good. So I did set it up, pretty okay then for you all to find things. So yeah, so like I said, if you haven't finished it, go ahead and still complete those. You'll have until today to finish them. Another change that I wanted to make with you all is, you probably noticed that the due dates were due for Tuesday. I'm going to go ahead and change that to where I'm going to extend it an extra day until Wednesday, because it makes more sense to have everything due on Wednesday since we meet on Wednesday, so that way, if let's say after we have our class meeting on Wednesdays, then you can quickly take time to go and complete the work that afternoon or evening, since you already were in class. So I think that would be a better idea to do it that way, since you will have had class on that day, and that way it's, you still are in that class attendance mindset, so to speak. So that's why I'll go ahead and make those changes throughout the semester to push those due dates back from Tuesday to Wednesday. So I think that makes sense, right? Might as well do that since we're going to be meeting on those days anyway. So that's what I'll do. So I've already changed it for the first quiz. So instead of next Tuesday, it'll be next Wednesday. So that way, if you all have time after our class meeting, you can always, get to work on that, which I would definitely recommend for y'all to do that, to do so. But anyway, so with that being said, I also wanted to show you something really quickly. So I mentioned last time that the official textbook that we're using in class is We the People 13th edition, which again, I do really need to reiterate that. But what I've also done for you all is I've also included the Open Educational Resource textbook as an additional resource that you all can use. So just note that it's not the official textbook that we're using, but I wanted to also include that for you all as an additional resource. So let me go ahead and share the screen so I can show you where it's located at really quickly. So it's going to be in the additional resources here. So let me go ahead and share the screen here. Let's see. It's not. Okay, I'm sorry. My computer is. Let's see. I don't know why it's not letting me share. Hold on. Give me just a moment. Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay, so it should. Okay, good. All right. So it should reflect on itself. Okay. So if you go to additional resources, you'll see that it's right there, right? So you click on it, then it'll pop up over here. This is the link that it pops up to. This is the OpenStax. This is the OpenStax link. So you can view online. You can also download a PDF of it. So there's different options for you to be able to view it, right? So if you click on View Online, it'll take you to the textbook itself. And this is a pretty good textbook. I've used it several times in other classes that I've taught that actually do use OER. So it is good. It is a good textbook. The obviously, of course, the paid ones are going to be they're going to have a little more resource and things like that. So that's why SDC still uses the paid ones. but we might move into a situation where we might move, fully to OER. That's something that the college is kind of pushing towards. So again, I still want for you all to get the paid textbook if you all can, but again, it's you all's money, so I wanted to give you all extra resources that you all could use to try to help you all out, because some of y'all might feel like, hey, you know what, if I have this might be enough. So again, it's your money. It's totally up to you. It's your call in terms of what you all would like to do with this. But just note that this is an extra resource that you all have for you all. And again, like I said, if you click on the additional resources, this is where it's located. So just wanted to show that to you all really quickly. So again, this is an extra resource that you all can use if you all are interested in that, or maybe if you want to use that, until your textbook does come in. But again, it's totally up to you all in terms of what you all feel most comfortable with. And like I said, we're going to have class meetings. In the class meetings, of course, we're going to go over the material. We can also do other things as well. We can also have like, study sessions and things like that, where I can help you all on the test. So Diana asks, what are our tests going to be based on? Well, it's the tests are supposed to be, because we in the department, we took some time in terms of crafting the tests. The tests are supposed to be designed in a way to where it's not tied specifically to a specific textbook, whether it's We the People or the the OER book. So the tests are supposed to be versatile in that, to where the questions are not necessarily tied from one book or the other, right? They're questions that we came up with as a department. So and the other thing that also, the way these tests also work is that everyone's test is going to be different, because it pulls from a pool of questions where you've got, like, let's say, the tests are going to be 50 questions, but not everyone is going to get the same 50 questions, right? For question one, it's going to come from maybe 10 choices. Question two has another 10 choices. And so it's meant to do this as a way to make the test more random, so that you don't have, the same test being taken by all the people in the class, again, to cut down on the risk of cheating. So, Diana, to answer your question, the tests are not based on a specific book. They're just general questions, obviously, of course, based on the content that we're going to be covering, but it's not like they come from a specific publisher's test bank or something like that. It's something that we in the department, we came up with ourselves. So yeah, a lot of work went into the tests that we use for our classes. So they're not really based on any textbook. I'm sorry that I gave you kind of like a 2-3 minute answer, but I wanted to explain in terms of where the test questions come from and also how the tests operate. So I hope that kind of clears up your question a little bit. But anyway, yeah. So again, like I said, it's totally up to you all in terms of what you all want to do with, because I know money's tight. I know, I understand that, that's why you all are here, right? To try to make a little bit more money, so I understand. So these are some things that I want to try to do for you all, to try to help you all as you, progress through your class and progress through your academic studies, and maybe kind of give you all some options, so to speak, right? These are, that way you have options, and then you can decide for yourself in terms of what options you all want to take here. So, but anyway, so with that being said, okay, any other questions before we start with chapter 1 today? Does anyone have any questions, or nobody has any other questions? Okay, no questions. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so then let's go ahead and dive into chapter 1 here. Okay, so let me get the PowerPoint going. Okay, so then let me go ahead and share really quickly. Let's see. Hold on. Let me go ahead and make sure that everything is showing up here. So somebody please tell me if the PowerPoint is showing up, because I'm going to share the screen here, and it's and I'm not going to be able to see anything because I've put it in the PowerPoint view. Can you all see this chapter 1, American political culture? Can you all see this or no?
Yes.
Okay, somebody tell me, because I'm sorry, I can't see. Okay, thank you, because I can't see the chat because it's already hit. Okay, good. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with chapter 1, American political culture. Now, has anyone had a chance to kind of go through chapter 1, so to speak, to kind of maybe familiarize yourself with it, or not really? If not, it's okay. It's been a long weekend. I also didn't have a chance to get through my grad school stuff. I mean, I did a little bit, but I didn't get to finish what I need to finish as well. It's been a long week, right? Because we just got started and it's difficult. So I understand if you all haven't really had a chance to. So, but that's fine. What we'll go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and dive into chapter one. Hopefully, we should be able to finish chapter one by this week, by next class meeting. Okay, so chapter one is basically the intro chapter. This is where we're going to learn about what government is, as well as a lot of different aspects of government. So there's going to be a lot of definitions here, right? This chapter is probably going to have, I would probably say, the most definitions out of any chapter, because we have to have a lot of definitions so that you all can understand the building blocks of government, right? And what government is, what is its function, what is its purpose, what politics is, why do we have politics, as well as different forms of government we're going to be taking a look at. Obviously, of course, we're going to take a look at what a democracy is. We're also going to take a look at autocracies, oligarchies, and totalitarianism government, authoritarianism. We're going to take a look at those. We're also going to take a look towards the end of the chapter. We're going to take a look at the three main aspects of American political culture. We're going to, obviously, of course, we mentioned democracy, so we'll go more into detail in democracy. But we'll also talk about liberty, and we'll also talk about equality. So we will talk about those three main aspects of American political culture here, as well as have a little bit of a discussion in terms of the current state of American politics today, in terms of, how do Americans perceive politics? Is politics important to Americans? Obviously, of course, we're going to talk about the importance of politics in this class, obviously, but does that trickle down to the everyday person? Does the everyday person also feel the same sense of, do they also understand why it's important to know what's going on in the political world, why it's important to keep up with the news? Long story short, I'm going to show you all some data in terms of how Americans don't really keep up with what's going on too much and things like that. But again, we'll talk more about that as we continue here. So, okay, anyway, so let's start with the definitions here really quickly. Let me also reiterate to you all, like I mentioned last time, that there's a bunch of extra resources for you all. I have previous lecture videos that I've done for previous semesters, as well as other lecture videos from other professors, as well as the crash course videos. And then within the additional resources, there's more videos like news, news videos and news articles and things like that. Excuse me. So because of this online class, I definitely want for you all to have as many resources as possible. So if you need to look at more things, you're more than welcome to do so. Plus, there's also tons of other resources out there as well that might not be included in this class, but I mean, YouTube's a great way to find things. I mean, there's things happening even every day, right? So again, there's tons of information within political science that you all can look up to help you all with your studying here within this class. And if anyone does find like a really interesting resource that I haven't included, please let me know so I can definitely look at it and hopefully try to include it in our class resources here. So, but okay, so yeah, feel free to send me anything that you feel might be interesting. Okay, so then the definitions here. Okay, so government. So government refers to institutions and procedures through which a territory and its people are ruled. So when you all think of government, what kind of comes to you all's mind first in terms of what government is, like, or just in general, like when you think of the word government, like what are some first thoughts that come to y'all's mind? Like, does anybody have any reactions to the word government? Does anybody want to kind of, mention really quick what y'all think it means to you all? Go ahead. I'm sorry. What do y'all think like government means to you? Like, what pops in your mind when you first think of the word government?
Like structure to a place into a society.
Yes, and do we need that structure? Is that something that's needed within society?
Yes, because as much as we would like to function without a government, people are less likely to act upon their negative thoughts or things that they're not supposed to do if there's a repercussion or like a consequence to it.
Yes, yes. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, because you're exactly right in that because society is so large, that we have to have systems in place because the honor system isn't going to work when you've got a society that's so large and nobody really knows each other, right? it might work within a family, and even then, sometimes it still doesn't, right? I mean, parents still have to have consequences for their children, right? So obviously, of course, we're going to need to have a system in place that is going to determine what is acceptable behavior and what is not acceptable behavior, and also have those those punishments that go with it, right? I mean, that's of course why we have speed limit signs, right? Because if we didn't have those signs, and people would just drive however they wanted to, and of course we could definitely imagine what that would happen, right? In terms of creating more road safety hazards, right? With a lot more accidents and things like that. So there's a reason for why we have these procedures that are put in place to try to create a working and orderly society, at least as best as possible, right? And the institutions, of course, are the structures that decide these procedures, right? When it comes to like the different levels of government, when we look at federal, state, and local governments, right? They have their responsibilities to protect their citizens, to ensure that society is running, as at an optimal level as smoothly as possible. And of course, we're going to talk about how this is, of course, easier said than done. But yes, the whole idea of government is so that there can be a system in place so that society can try to be able, to operate, right? Yes, you all are exactly right in terms of the need for government as well as what government is. Now, of course, we also have the term politics, right, which refers to conflict over the leadership structure and policies of government. So, government is looked at as the what, right? That in terms of what needs to be done. Politics is looked at as the how, in terms of how it's going to be done, right? In terms of who's in power, who's going to be in control, because whoever is in control is going to determine how the government is going to operate, right? And that conflict over who's in control, when it comes to having elections that will determine who the elected leaders are going to be, and then once these elected leaders are in power, then they're going to follow through with their agenda, right? Because they won this election, so they have the right to govern, right? They have this mandate to rule, so to speak, right? And in terms of the structure of government, how government is structured, because not every government is going to be structured exactly the same, as well as the policies that are put forth by the leadership and the people who are in power, so to speak. This goes into the politics, right? And this goes into and politics also doesn't just come from the actual leaders itself, right? It's also the people and how they perceive the leaders, how they perceive the decisions that are being made. This also is part of politics, right? I mean, you all engage in politics as well, right? In terms of looking to see who you might support for a particular political office, or now that elections are over right now, at least for the time being. Now we're moving on to governing, and you can see what's going on within governing, and you can have different opinions about whether you agree or disagree with certain political parties and what they're doing, or maybe you agree with a certain political party but you don't agree with how they're going about doing these things. There's a lot of different that's why politics is very fascinating, because there's a lot of different things that you can do within politics, and there's a lot of different ways to kind of go about it, so to speak. So do these two definitions make sense to you all, or does anyone want to add anything to this? Is there anything that I skipped, or maybe that you all would like to add for these two definitions, or anybody have any thoughts on this, or not really? Did it make sense then, so for the most part?
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay. Yes, because feel free to jump in, everyone. Okay, because this is an online synchronous class, we can we can definitely try to make this feel more more like an in-person class as we possibly can, right? It basically is an in-person class. We're just meeting over the internet, right? So feel free to jump in. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to so all I ask is that if you're going to do that, make sure that you use the raise hand function there, so that way I can so that way I can know that someone wants to ask a question or make a comment here really quickly. Okay, anyway, so is government needed? Okay, so obviously, of course, there's different opinions about this, right? Some people feel that government is not needed, and Americans in particular have always harbored some suspicion of government. I mean, it goes back to even before our founding, right? And we'll talk about the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution in Chapter 2, where we will go more to detail on this this idea of wanting to rein back government, not wanting to give government more power than what it needs to be able to do its job. and even then, there's still debate about the power of government. It's an interesting topic, right? Because when we're going to go into chapter 2, we're going to talk about how the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, they had vehement disagreements about how much power government should have, as well as the role of government. What are the things that government should get involved in and not get involved in? But with that being said, and of course that debate still goes on to this day, right? Which we'll talk more about that in chapter 2, as well as throughout the class. But a government is designed to provide what are called public goods. Public goods are goods that benefit everyone, but that no individual or group on its own can afford to supply. So basically, what a public good is, these are the actions that government takes on our behalf that we would not be able to do so for ourselves, or at least not be able to do so at the efficiency or the magnitude that government is able to do so, right? So examples would include defense against foreign aggression, maintenance of public order, and property rights, and some measure of economic security, right? So when we look at this first one, right, when we look at defense against foreign aggression, right? So if, let's say, North Korea wanted to be stupid enough and wanted to launch an ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, over the California coast, the West Coast, obviously, of course, we would not be the ones that would actually be responding to this, right? It's not actually going to be us in this class individually. It's going to be our military, right? It's going to be our defense forces. They are going to be the armed servicemen and women. They are going to be the ones who are actually going to defend us against foreign aggressions, right? So of course, obviously, the money that comes from national defense, it comes from taxes, as well as there's other ways that the money comes from, right, in terms of government spending, which we'll get more into that towards the end of the class. But the point is that the government has to spend that money in order to pay for for our national defense. We also see this more at the local level, right? The maintenance of public order. So this is more like your policing, right, and your first responders. This is why, same thing, like if, let's say, you've got medical emergencies or things like that, right? When it comes to responding to to emergencies, right? It's not like the police are going to show up to your house. Let's say you call the police, and the police are responding to a an issue that you're calling about. Let's say you wanted to call about someone trying to break into your house, right? But then you see that they leave, right? Because let's say they get scared, or they saw that you're trying to call the police and then they leave. The police are not going to show up to your house and be like, well, the robber escaped, so we're gonna have to charge you for coming out here, because now there's no need for us to come out here, right? They're not gonna do that, right? Because obviously, of course, that money comes from the public taxes, and that's a public service that's provided to you, all right? Same thing like with the fire department, right? If they come to put out a fire, they're not gonna send you an invoice, for putting out the fire, right? Because again, that's a public service, and things like that, So let's see, did somebody have a question right now, or I thought I heard someone comment something. Did anybody have a comment, or nobody had a comment or anything like that? Okay, all right. Okay, sounds good. Okay, let's go to move on here really quickly. Okay, so really quickly, just this is kind of an interesting chart here that I also like to go over in my classes. Basically, this shows just what is the presence of government in our daily lives. I don't know if any of y'all have ever stopped to think about this, right? Have any of y'all ever stopped to think, what, this morning when I was driving to work, I'm so thankful for all these potholes that are everywhere, and I just hit a really bad one on my way to work, and now I'm concerned about my car. I'm just really thankful for the really great roads that government paves here. If you can tell, I'm being sarcastic here, but no, but it is true, right? It is true that there are a lot of services that government provides for us, and these services, while sometimes might not be as satisfactory as we might want, the government does do a lot for us, right? If you look at waking up, this is standard time set by the national government. If you take a shower, this is water that's provided by the local government, right? Have any of y'all, like, for those of y'all who maybe pay your water and your garbage bill, have y'all noticed that that's a local charge, right? That's the city that handles that. Have any of y'all noticed that the city is the one that handles your water and waste disposal? Because these are considered public utilities, right? there's all kinds of other ones, right? I mean, again, going to your campus, right? The state taxpayers as well as local property taxes fund STC, and things like that, right? So there's all kinds of things. The food that you're going to eat is also regulated, by the FDA, right? To inspect, to make sure, and not just the FDA, right? But also there's also local agencies that also inspect restaurants, right? Like if any of y'all noticed, if any of y'all have ever gone to eat, have y'all noticed that it's usually by the counter where they'll have like all these plaques from like the county and the city, like if let's say you're going to be like a server, you have to have like a food handler's permit from the city and things like that. Like government is involved in the regulation of businesses to ensure that that people are safe, right? Because you don't want to um, and sometimes it still happens, right? You get sick, you get food poisoning because you ate somewhere that maybe they weren't they weren't taking care of the food as best as they should have. But the point is that that doesn't happen as often because of the fact that government is there to inspect the food and to ensure as best as possible that the food is still relatively safe for you all to eat, so to speak, right? So again, there's all kinds of other examples here. When it comes to like street lighting paid by local and city governments, police patrols by city government, as well as county government. If you live outside of the city limits, that's the sheriff's department. So you can see that the government is interacting within our daily lives in ways that we might not even imagine, right? Another one that I don't think is mentioned here is the mail, right? Obviously, of course, the United States Postal Service provides our mail every day, other than on the weekends or holidays, right? So there's all kinds of government involvement within our daily lives that we might not necessarily be aware of, and so it's good to kind of look at this to kind of get a sense for just how much government is involved in what we do and the presence that we have in our daily lives here, right? So just kind of think about this a little bit as we as just kind of think about this a little bit as we progress through our class here. Okay, really quickly. So let me take a swig of water really quickly. Hold on. Okay, so with that being said, let's take a look at some of the forms of government: structure, size, and operation. So obviously, of course, let's start here at the bottom and then work our way up. So obviously, of course, the United States operates under a democratic system, a democracy, which is a system of rule that permits citizens to play a significant part in the governmental process, usually accomplished through the election of key public officials. Yes, when it comes to a democracy, the main way that the citizens are able to get involved in the process and ultimately decide the fate of their government is through these fair and open elections, right, where people have the right to be able to decide for themselves who they want for their leaders to be, right? And of course, democracy also, this is just kind of like the main way that people are able to actually get involved, and the most consequential method. But there's other methods as well. We'll talk about this when we get to like public opinion and we talk about interest groups. We'll talk about how that people can try to lobby their government. They can try to contact their government. This is a right within the First Amendment to petition our government, to redress grievances, to peacefully assemble. This is all within our First Amendment rights to where we can try to influence government, not just through elections, but also even during non-election seasons. Like, if I wanted to, I could go and try to contact Monica de la Cruz, the new congresswoman from District 15. I have the right to go and contact her office and try to see if I can set up an appointment with her because she is my elected official and I'm her constituent and I have that right. It's the same reason why you have the right to contact me and request, to email me, request a meeting, things like that. If you have any concerns or any issues or you need help with something, because I am a public, I am a public servant. I have that obligation to respond to you and to try to help you as best as possible with those concerns. So again, this is the hallmark of a democracy, right? In terms of the citizens getting involved and making their voice heard. But we also have other forms of government, right? Democracy, while democracy is the most accepted form of government, it's the most common form of government. It is what we would call the gold standard of government. It's what society expects. the idea of a democracy is actually very recent. If we look at almost all of human history, have you all noticed that autocracy has been the has been what has been the most what I'm trying to say is that throughout almost all of human history, governments have operated under autocracies. Democracy is actually pretty recent. This idea of having the people decide who their leaders are going to be, that's actually pretty recent. Instead, throughout more olden times, we've had what is called an autocracy, right? Government by a single non-elected individual, king, queen, or dictator. I mean, this should sound familiar to you, all right? I mean, if you all remember studying history, you all will recall about all these different empires and countries and societies that were ruled by one single person, right? I mean, going back to even the BC era, right, with the pharaohs, as well as the sultans and the czars over in Russia, right? And then of course, obviously, the kings and queens of Europe, right? I mean, this is this is obviously the was the accepted form of of government for many thousands and thousands of years, centuries, millenniums, things like that. And of course, the idea of autocracy, right? It explains it itself, right? That one person controls everything. They're not elected. The way that the whoever's in charge, whether it's a king or queen or any of these different types of names that I've mentioned, right? Because pharaohs, they're all the same, right? They have different names, but their function is still the same, right? Where it's one person who has the right to control everything. Where they get this right to control everything is what's called divine right. The idea of divine right is where the reason why this particular person in this particular time has the right to rule and govern is because God, or whatever God they believe in, that God willed for that person to be born into that specific family, that specific lineage. They could have been born in any other family, right? But because that particular person, that particular soul, whatever you want to call it, they were born into that specific family, that gives them the right to rule. So that's what the idea of divine right is, and that's where autocracy gets its authority, right? To rule by divine right. Moving on, we also have what's called oligarchy. This is a government by a small group that is not accountable to citizens. Military officers, landowners, or wealthy merchants are examples of this, right? So, excuse me, an oligarchy is a form of government where a small group of wealthy elites are the ones who control everything, right? These you see this in even in more like modern countries today, right? You don't necessarily have one person controlling everything, but instead you have a group of people that control everything. You're going to make an argument that China is like this, right? Because even though Xi Jinping he's the elected he's the leader right there of China by the Communist Party, but the Communist Party, the Chinese Communist Party, they are the ones who actually control everything, because they're the ones who basically decide who is going to be president and things like that, right? So they have that influence over one particular person, right? As opposed to an autocracy, like North Korea is an example of that. Kim Jong Un, he's the one that has power, right? He's the one that has total control, and the party is secondary to him. Whereas in China, Xi Jinping is secondary to the party. I don't know if that kind of makes sense, right? And you see this right in other countries, like usually some of these like third world countries where the military is in control and they decide who the next ruler is going to be, as well as some of these warlords, that rule in some of these rural areas. You tend to see this like in some of these, underdeveloped countries like in Asia and Africa. You tend to see more of this oligarchy, so to speak, right? Now, these are also not mutually exclusive, right? Because these are the structure, size, and operational forms of government. And then we also have, limiting government, right? So governments also vary in how they govern, right? In terms of how they go about making the decisions. So in a democracy, democracies are usually coincide with what is called constitutional government. This is limited both in what it can do, substantive limits, and methods it can employ, which are procedural limits. What these mean is that constitutions, and we're going to get into constitutions more in chapter 2. If you haven't figured out, I've mentioned chapter 2 at least like 5 or 6 times. Chapter 2 is a very important chapter. I'd probably say it's the most important of the chapters in the entire book. and as you can see why I keep referencing it, but we'll see about it when we get to chapter 2 next week. Um, Chapter 2, we're going to talk more about constitutions, but yes, but in terms of what a constitutional government is to begin with, it has its limits, right? A constitution limits what the government can and can't do. So those are called the substantive limits. It outlines what it's allowed to do, what it's not allowed to do. And it also mentions how it goes about doing those things, right? Government can't just do, it's not enough just to say, okay, government, you can do this, 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 and this, and then have at it. You can do whatever you want to accomplish those goals. You also have to have rules in place for how they go about accomplishing that. And that's what's called the procedural limits here. These are the procedures that are put in place in terms of how government can go about doing these things, right? So democracies also, these constitutional democracies, they have, it's almost like, two sides of the same coin, so to speak, right? Where you have the freedom for people to be able to engage in these elections, but they also have to do so within the limits of the Constitution, right? Now, authoritarian government recognizes no limits on its authority, but it is constrained by other institutions such as business or a church. These are the types of governments where, again, they try to, excuse me, these are the types of governments where they do try to assert their dominance, and they do try to, take control, but they are limited in their power. You see this a lot, and again, going back to some of these third world countries like in Asia and Africa, they tend to also be authoritarian because the government the government's too weak on its own, right? The government does not have the resources to properly control everything, so they have to enter into agreements with some of the elites, right? So oligarchies usually coincide with authoritarian governments, right? Where the government has to engage in agreements with some of the wealthier people, some of these warlords and chiefs that that are out on out in different territories across the country. So the government has to engage in agreements with these groups, or else the groups will constrain them, right? Such as like I said, businesses or churches, especially like in olden times, where like the Roman Catholic Church had a lot of authority to basically keep some of these runaway countries from getting too powerful, like what happened with Louis XIV, where basically he was threatened to be excommunicated if he kept running rampant and trying to take over all of Europe. So nowadays people might think, excommunication, big deal. Nobody really cares about religion too much anyway. At least some people don't. But back then, back 500 years ago, 400, 500 years ago, that would have been a huge scandal, right? Being thrown out of the Catholic Church. That would have been so incredibly shameful. So back then, shame was a lot more of a stronger, deterrent, so to speak. And then lastly, totalitarian government. This recognizes no limits on its authority and seeks to eliminate other institutions that might challenge it. So again, Kim Jong-un, North Korea, is a great example of this, right? No limits on his authority, and not only that, but if anyone tries to, if anyone tries to challenge his rule, they're not going to last very long, right? I mean, I don't know if you all have noticed. I don't know if you all know that in terms of how repressive North Korea is, it's so repressive that they don't even let the men have long hair. Like I looked this up. As someone who likes to have long hair, I looked that up and I was just like, wow, like it's insane, right? Like everyone has to look the same, everyone has to pretty much dress the same. It's insane just how how little freedom they have over there, right? So again, totalitarian, total control. They seek total control of power there, and they try to go after people and institutions that might try to limit that power, so to speak. So do these make sense in terms of autocracy, oligarchy, democracy, as well as constitutional government, authoritarian government, totalitarian government? Just please let me know if all of this does not quite make sense here, right? These are not mutually exclusive, right? Like autocracies usually tend to be totalitarian governments. Oligarchies usually tend to be authoritarian governments. I mean, you could even do some matching here, right? And then democracies usually do tend to also be constitutional governments, right? So they do tend to kind of go hand in hand here. Not all the time, but you do see them more than not here, right? Okay, so let's kind of skip over really quickly. Let's get to again. We talked a little bit more about politics in terms of politics is a struggle over who gets what, when, and how. Politics, of course, is the conflict over leadership structure and policies of any organization to which people belong to, right? As we mentioned, earlier at the start of our discussion, right? So So politics is extremely important, right? Because there's a lot at stake when it comes to political decisions, right? This is why people make such a big deal about elections. This is why um, by this summer we're probably already going to have debates for the next presidential election. I mean, can you believe it? Like, we're already going to have a presidential election next year. It's insane just how fast time goes, right? It's just, it feels like we just had, the last, presidential election. But yeah, no, it's already been several years, and so we're gonna have debates now moving forward, probably in the summer. Usually the summer before the election year is when the debates usually start. So of course, even before then, we'll start to have presidential announcements. I think Trump already announced that he's going to run again. So we'll start to have more of those announcements coming in within the next couple of months here. But the point here is that there's a reason why politics gets a lot of attention, right? There's a reason why it's always in the news, right? That you've got newspapers that are devoted specifically to politics, like, example would be like Politico or Vox, some of these newspapers, right? Or some of these YouTube channels like Democracy Now! Or the Young Turks or things like that, right? That is their focus, is on politics. That is what they do. There's tons of bloggers, and other political commentators where that's what they do, right? There's a lot of money to be made in politics, right? That this generates ratings and gets a lot of attention, right? So what I'm trying to say here, everyone, is that there's a reason why politics gets all this attention, and it goes back to this point of power here, right? Politics also involves power. Political power is the influence over a government's leadership, organization, and policies, right? So the people that are in government have an enormous amount of power because they're going to be the ones who are going to decide ultimately what government's going to do, how they're going to go about doing it, and the way the government is going to make these decisions or not make decisions, right? That rests on the power that these leaders have, right? I mean, that's why the president of the United States is, colloquially called, the leader of the free world, so to speak, right? Because of the power that the United States has, right? Being the most powerful country in the history of the world, so to speak, right? So that's why there's a lot of attention to this, right? And there's a lot of that's why people, you'll have some of these wealthy donors that will spend millions of dollars on campaigns, and you think to yourself, wow, like, there must be something, really important there for these people to spend millions of dollars. Or another example would be, you've got some of these members of Congress who are in their late 80s. Chuck Grassley, the current senator from Illinois, he just won re-election. He's going to be, I think, 94 by the time his term is up. He's 88, I think, right now. Most people don't even live that long, and he is wanting to continue working in Congress. So the first thought that comes to my mind is, wow, like, that must be a pretty cool gig, right? There must be something really good about being in Congress if you've got, all these, elderly people that are wanting to still not just go and retire, but want to still, like, want to keep working, right? So what is it about that position of authority that makes it so lucrative and so so powerful, right? That people would want to people, may even pass away before their term is over, right? They won't even get to enjoy their retirement. So these are just some things to kind of think about, right? In terms of, hey, maybe there's something there that, that might be pretty good it might be a pretty good gig for the people that are there, right? So in democracies, politics is shaped by how people are able to participate in the political process, right? Sorry about that. I'm getting some emails here. I know what's going on. It's because STC sends out all the daily news emails, like what's going on campus and things like that. They usually send them at around this time around too. So sorry about that. I'll try not to have my email open for next time here. But anyway, so with that being said, let's talk a little bit about the kinds of democracies here. So again, like I mentioned, so in democracies, politics is shaped by how people are able to participate in the political process. So we've got two forms, right? We've got representative and direct democracy. So representative democracy, which is also called a republic, this is government in which the populace selects representatives who play a significant role in governmental decision-making process. This is usually the most common form of democracies in democratic countries. And the reason for this is because since democratic countries are so large, I mean, the United States, with its, almost 300 million people, that's one of the largest ones, right? But even in some of these democracies in Europe with maybe 40 million people, 30 million people, 20 million people, that's still a lot of people that are in a country, and so it would be virtually impossible. I mean, not even virtually, it would be impossible to have all 20 million of those people get involved in the political process directly. Like, what I'm trying to say here is that you can't have all 20 million people. I mean, that's not counting like the people of voting age, but let's say, I don't know, let's just say like half of it, right? Let's say 10 million. You can't have 10 million people going into like the chambers of Congress and actually, or I'm sorry, their legislative, their legislative headquarters. You can't have them going into the chamber and actually all trying to get involved in the actual debate and actual voting of things, right? I mean, that would just be completely chaotic. So instead, what you have is you have a system where you have people that are elected on behalf of those people, right? So you have like legislative districts or whatever. Basically, the point I'm trying to make is that you have a group of people that will select their representatives, and then those representatives will make decisions on their behalf, right? So I mentioned Monica de la Cruz, right? She's the new congresswoman here for District 15, right? So it's not going to be all of the people that are in District 15, like like Edinburgh, parts of McAllen, Mission. It's not going to be all those people that are going to go to Washington and actually vote on those bills, but instead it's going to be her because she won a general election where the people decided, to vote for her, and she won that election. So now she has that right to make those decisions on the people's behalf, right? And again, as I mentioned, we also have the right to go and contact her and let her know about the job that she's doing. In direct democracy, this is kind of what I was saying right now, right? This is where the people actually vote directly, right? So this rule that permits citizens to vote directly on laws and policies. Now, we do have this, somewhat often here. Like, I'll give you an example, like in Texas government, where when it comes to the passing of constitutional amendments to the state constitution, it's kind of like a hybrid of this, right? Because it's a hybrid where we can't propose amendments to the Constitution, but we can decide whether they get approved or not. Because in Texas, we have the process to where the House and the Senate, they have to get a 2/3 vote to approve a measure to amend the Constitution, and then it goes to the voters, and then the voters decide with a simple majority whether to amend the Constitution or not. So we also have more local examples of direct democracy where I don't know if you all have heard of these before, where let's say the school district that you live in, they want to have what's called a bond election where they want to raise, they'll raise taxes a little bit to try to pay for certain new facilities. This usually happens if, like, let's say the school district wants something for performing arts. Let's see. Somebody has a question. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Elda. Go ahead. You had a question? Elda, did you have a question or no? I'm sorry. Okay. Let's go ahead and continue. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand again, and then we'll get to it. The point that I was making was that I don't know if you ever heard of these bond elections, right? Where the school districts will try to raise money for these facilities. Usually, it's maybe like for a new performing arts center or something like that. So if they want to get more money coming in from the community, they have to ask the community to for that money, right? And that's what's called a bond election, right? Where the people will decide yes or no whether to to accept that raising of taxes to raise that money. So that's an example of direct democracy, right? Because it's not the school district, it's not the board, the superintendent. They're not the ones who ultimately make the decision whether to approve for more money to come in. It's the people of the district, right? It's the actual taxpayers of the specific school district that will decide whether the money will get approved or not. So does this make sense or not really in terms of the different types of democracies, representative versus direct? Does this kind of make sense to you all or not really? It does kind of make sense for you all? Okay, please let me know if it does not. So we have about 10 minutes left. So let's kind of go ahead and scroll through here really quickly here. Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's get to politics and interest groups really quickly. So we will talk about interest groups later on in the semester. But what's important to know about interest groups is that in democratic societies, and the United States, usually allows this even more so than some other countries, where groups and organized interests also are allowed to participate in politics. And the the idea behind these interest groups is that I don't know if any of you all have heard the phrase strength in numbers before, but it's an important rule to remember with interest groups, because what it does, what an interest group is, it's a group of like-minded individuals that share similar political viewpoints, or they believe in the same cause, and they want for, they want for something to be accomplished here. So instead of going at it by themselves, what they do is they all band together and they form these groups that believe in the same thing or similar things, and they all work together as a group to try to get the attention of the government, right? Because it's a lot easier to get the attention of an elected official if you've got like thousands of people within this group as opposed to just one person, right? I like to use the example of, like, let's say, I have a student who wants to contact me about something. I'll try to get back to them as soon as possible, but it certainly isn't going to be as pressing of an issue. If, let's say, I've got like 20 students, all, like, say I've got 20 students email me, or I've got 20 students like lined outside my office, right? Then it's gonna be like, oh crap, like what happened? Like what's wrong? So it heightens the situation, right? Because you've got more people that have issues, right? So again, we'll talk more about this when we get to the interest group chapter, but their political activities include providing funds for candidates, lobbying government officials, and trying to influence public opinion. And again, we will talk about these in greater detail as we, once we get to the interest groups chapter, in terms of how these groups can try to influence public opinion with, spending of ads, and we'll mention that as well. Actually going and trying to lobby government officials, actually meeting them to try to get, try to convince them to vote a certain way on a certain bill, as well as providing funds for candidates, and actually, engaging in these, in terms of contributing to candidates. So we'll talk about, what some of the restrictions some of these groups might have, right? But again, so pluralism, it discusses this whole notion of how the interest groups compete with each other, right? So a pattern of struggles among interests is called group politics or pluralism. And pluralism is the theory that all interests are and should be free to compete for influence in government. This competition results in compromise and moderation. So the idea is that you don't want to necessarily restrict these groups from being able to lobby members of Congress, or lobby government, or, and try to get involved in the political process, because the idea is that these groups will kind of balance each other out, and then it'll create a situation where you're going to have more of this compromise, because you've got two groups that might be wanting, two separate objectives. Like, let's say you've got the NRA competing with the NAACP about gun rights and gun restrictions and things like that. So because you've got two groups that are kind of on the opposite end of this particular political issue, that might allow for there to be more compromise on this issue, because you might, I like to use the phrase, you might not get you might not have two groups that are unequally happy, but instead you'll have two groups that are equally unhappy, I guess you could say, right? Because neither group is getting all that they want, but at least they're being equal, right? So I don't know, it's kind of interesting. It's interesting terminology. But again, we'll talk more about this later on when we get to the interest group chapter really quickly. But just know for now that this is what pluralism is, where you have those groups compete against each other, and that competition is good, because again, it will try to not allow for one group to be more powerful than the other here, right? So okay, let's see. Okay, yeah, we got about 5 minutes left. Let's see if we can get to political knowledge here. Let's see. Yeah, let's get to political knowledge, right? So political knowledge is a key ingredient for political participation. Political knowledge encompasses possessing information about the formal institutions of government, political actors, and political issues. And democracy functions best when citizens are informed. So, political knowledge is essential for a healthy democracy, because in a healthy democracy, you need for the people to know what's going on. You need for the people to know what to do when it comes to government, right? They need to know about the structures of government. They need to know how government is supposed to operate. They need to know about the different levels of government, who's in government, and what government is responsible for, as well as the political issues that are being discussed, right? And how to go about discussing these political issues. Because if you don't know anything about how our government is set up, then it's going to be very hard for you to really get anywhere in terms of trying to make your voice heard and try to get things accomplished, right? If you don't even know the ground rules of our government, you don't even know where to start, right? If you don't know whether the issue that you're wanting to bring up is a federal issue or a state issue or a local issue, then you're going to be completely lost in terms of how to go about doing this. And again, and as someone who has taught this for several years and has studied this for even longer, I get it. I understand that it's difficult, right? Our government is not the most it's not the most user friendly type of government in terms of how things are set up. We've got some convoluted systems in terms of like the electoral college, which tends to be very confusing, right? Our government is not the most user friendly in terms of knowing how it operates, and there's also stuff to be said about what operates on paper, and if there's other things that go on that maybe we'll talk more about that later on, right? In terms of what in terms of how government actually is supposed to operate. But the point I'm trying to make here, everyone, is that if you don't have this political knowledge about what's going on and how government is supposed to operate, then like I said, it's going to be very difficult for you all to be able to really do things, right? And so again, democracy functions best when citizens are informed. And what we're going to take a look at next time here is that Americans don't really know what's going on in terms of. I guess I can kind of leave you with this really quickly, and then we'll see if we can get back to well, let's talk about citizenship really quickly. So citizenship is informed and active membership in a political community. It derives from the Greek ideal, enlightened political engagement. So when we take a look at political knowledge, right, that it's more than just having a few opinions. Political knowledge involves knowing the rules and strategies that govern political institutions and knowing the principles that govern institutions, especially in ways that relate to one's own interests, right? So this goes back to what I was discussing, right? That you have to know the ground rules, right? You have to know what institutions are responsible for what. You have to know how they operate and how they make decisions, right? That's why I don't know if y'all heard what was going on the last couple of weeks with the new, with the new Congress, right? And the fiasco that was going on in the House with trying to get a speaker elected, right? So they could actually get down to business and actually get sworn in and actually start to work on what the House, in terms of actual House business, right? So some people might not necessarily know how that works, right? In terms of that you need to have a speaker first, so they can create the rules so that the House can actually function and operate, right? But again, that's kind of complicated, right? Some people might not necessarily know how that works or operates, because citizenship is not just being a citizen of a country, right? It also involves certain responsibilities, such as jury duty, right? Nobody really likes going to jury duty, but that's a responsibility that citizens have to have in our society, right? So that we can have an impartial jury of our peers and ultimately decide whether someone is guilty or not guilty in a criminal case, so to speak, right? So again, so this political knowledge is extremely important because you need to know what's going on and you need to know how to go about it, right? So last thing that we'll cover really quick and then we'll end for today because I know it's already time. While the internet has made it easier to get information, most Americans know little about current issues or even the basics of how government operates. In 2019, only 39% of Americans could identify all three branches of the federal government. Just think about that. So only 39%. There's 61% of people who they couldn't even name them. I'm not saying tell me something that they do. Just name the three branches. They couldn't name your legislative, executive, judicial. They couldn't, so they can't even name them, right? Let alone telling me what they do, right? So just think about that, right? 61% of Americans in 2019 couldn't even name the three branches, and a little over 1.5%. So what that's 0.05 of Americans knew the size of majority in Congress, 2/3 to override a presidential veto, right? So again, just look at this. You look at this information, right? However, more than 80% of Americans knew that citizens have a constitutional right to own a handgun, right? So they do know that, right? They do know about the Second Amendment. That is something that they do know, which you can thank the NRA and a lot of these interest groups for getting that information out there. So they're doing their job in terms of trying to educate the public. But when it comes to the actual government itself, I mean, look at some of these numbers, right? So just we'll kind of end that for today, on this really quickly in terms of just getting to know that Americans, for the most part, don't really have too much political knowledge, and and I see it on Facebook all the time. So anyway, okay, so that's it. We'll go to an end for here for today. So does anybody have any other questions before we end for today? I know it's already time. Anybody have any other questions before we end? Anything else that I can help you all with? Please make sure, like I said, that you all complete the introductory discussions and the syllabus acknowledgement. The syllabus acknowledgement is really easy. Just put that you have read, understood the syllabus, and you'll abide by it, and that's all. You just have to put that one sentence, and then you'll be fine. So please make sure that you all complete that so that way I can do the roster verifications, and that way you don't get like counted as not attending for the class. Okay, so any other questions or comments before we end for today? So do we reply as well? Yes, Ariana, you can reply. In fact, I encourage you all to reply in the introduction if you find something interesting. You all can have some good conversations when it comes to replying. I definitely encourage that. So feel free to do so if you all definitely would like to do so. So does anybody have any other questions or Jesse, go ahead.
I was just curious about the chapter quizzes. Are they short answer or multiple choice?
They're multiple choice.
Okay, and okay, I knew the test, the unit exam was multiple choice. I just didn't know about the quizzes.
Yes, the quizzes are multiple choice as well. Yeah, so the quiz and the exams are both multiple choice. Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. Are those open notes?
Yes, they are open note.
Okay,
Yes. Everything in this class is open note. Yes, sir.
okay, perfect. All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, you're welcome. Yes, Jesse. Yes, definitely. Good question. Good question. Anything else? Anything else I can help you out with before we end for today? Anything else? Nothing
Are
else?
the tests also open notes?
Yes, the tests are also open note. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Yes. You're welcome, Dariana. Yes. Okay. Anything else? Anything else? Okay. All right, everyone. Okay. Well, you all have a good rest of your day. I'll see you all on Wednesday, and good luck with you all studying. I got to do studying for my own class as well, so we're all going to be studying. So y'all take care, be safe, and y'all take care, everyone. Thank you all so much. Thank you
Thank
for
you. Good
stopping.
luck to you as well.
Okay. Thank you, Dariana. Thank you so much. Yes. We'll see you all Wednesday. Thank you. Take care. Bye. And please let me know if you have any questions. Right. Feel free to email me.